Good morning. Welcome to the next chapter. Frizzled like a fritter. All the women, or rather the witches, were now sitting motionless in their chairs, staring as though hypnotised at somebody who'd suddenly appeared on the platform. That somebody was another woman. The first thing I noticed about this woman was her size. She was tiny, probably no more than 4.5 feet tall. She looked quite young. I guessed about 25, 26, and she was very pretty. She had a rather stylish long black dress which reached right to the ground, and she wore black gloves that came all the way up to her elbows. Unlike the others, she wasn't wearing a hat. She didn't look to me like a witch at all, but she couldn't possibly not be one. Otherwise, what on earth was she doing up there on that platform? And why, for heaven's sake, were all the other witches gazing at her with such a mix of adoration, awe and fear? Very slowly, the young lady on the platform raised her hands to her face. I saw her gloved fingers unhook something from behind her ears. And then, she caught hold of her cheeks and she lifted her face clean away. The whole of that pretty face came away in her hands. It was a mask. She took off the mask. She turned sideways and placed it carefully upon the table nearby. And when she turned around and faced us, I very nearly screamed out loud. That face of hers was the most frightful and frightening thing I had ever seen. Just looking at it gave me the shakes all over. It was so crumpled and wizened, so shrunken and shriveled, it looked as though it had been pickled in vinegar. It was a fearsome and ghastly sight, and there was something terribly wrong with it, something foul and putrid and decayed. It seemed quite literally to be rotting away at the edges. And in the middle of her face, around the mouth and the cheeks, I could see all the skin all cankered and worm-eaten, as though maggots were working away in there. There were times when something is so frightful you become mesmerised and you can't look away. I was like that now. I was transfixed. I was numbed. I was magnetised by the sheer horror of this woman's features. But there was more to it than that. There was a look of serpents in those eyes. They flashed around the audience, and I knew immediately, of course, this was none other than the Grand High Witch. I knew also why she'd worn a mask. She could never have moved around in public, let alone a hotel, with her real face. Everyone who saw her would have run away screaming. "The doors!" shouted the Grand High Witch in a voice that filled the room and bounced around. "Are they chained and bolted?" "The doors are chained and bolted, your grandness," answered a voice from the audience. The brilliant snake eyes that were set so deep in the dreadful, rotting, worm-eaten face glared unblinkingly at the witches below her. "You there, remove your gloves," she shouted. Her voice, I noticed, had the same hard, metallic quality as the voice of a witch I'd met under the conker tree, only it was far louder, much more harsher, and it rasped and it grated and it snarled and it scraped, it shrieked and it growled. Everyone in the room was peeling off their gloves. I watched the hands of those in the black row. I wanted very much to see what their fingers looked like and whether my grandmother had been right. Ah, yes, I could see several of them now. I could see the brown claws curving on the tips of their fingers. They were about 2 inches long, those claws, and very sharp at the ends. "You may remove your shoes," barked the Grand High Witch. I heard a sigh of relief going up from the witches in the room as they kicked off their narrow high-heeled shoes, and then I got a glimpse under the chairs of several pairs of stockinged feet, square and completely toeless. Revolting they were, as though the toes had been sliced off with a carving knife. "You may remove your wigs," snarled the Grand High Witch. She had a very peculiar way of speaking. There was some kind of foreign accent there, something harsh and guttural, and she seemed to have trouble pronouncing the letter W. As well as that, she did something funny with the letter R. She would roll it round in her mouth like a piece of hot pork crackling before spitting it out. "Remove your wigs and get some fresh air to your spotted scalps," she shouted. Another sigh of relief arose from the audience, as though the hands went up under their heads, and the wigs, with the hats still on them, were lifted away. There now appeared in front of me row upon row of bald female heads, a sea of naked scalps, and every one of them red and itchy looking from being rubbed by the lining of the wigs. I can't simply tell you how awful they were, and how the whole sight was made more grotesque because underneath those frightful scabby bald heads the bodies were dressed in fashionable, rather pretty clothes. It was monstrous. It was unnatural. Oh heavens, I thought. Oh help, oh Lord have mercy on me. These bald-headed females are child killers, every single one of them. And I'm imprisoned in the same room and I can't escape. At that point, a new and doubly horrifying thought struck me. My grandmother had said that their special nose holes, they could smell out a child on a pitch-black night from right across to the side of the road. Up to now, my grandmother had been right every time. It seemed a certainty, therefore, that one of the witches in the back row was going to sniff me out at any moment and yell, "Dog stroppings!" would go up all over the room, and I'd be cornered like a rat. I knelt on the carpet behind the screen, hardly daring to breathe. Then suddenly I remembered another very important thing my grandmother had told me. The dirtier you are, she said, the harder it is for a witch to smell you. How long since I'd lost have a bath? Not for ages. I'd had my own room in the hotel. My grandmother never bothered with silly things like that. Come to think of it, I don't think I've had one since we arrived. When I had last washed my hands or face. Not this morning. Not yesterday either. I glanced down at my hands and they were covered with mud. Goodness knows what else. So perhaps I had a chance after all. The stink waves couldn't possibly get out through all that dirt. "Witches of England!" shouted the Grand High Witch. She herself, I noticed, had not taken off either her wig or her gloves or her shoes. "Witches of England!" she yelled. The audience stirred uneasily and sat up straight on their chairs. "Miserable witches!" she yelled. "Useless, lazy witches! Feeble, fribbling witches! You are a heap of idle, good-for-nothing worms!" A shudder went through the audience. The Grand High Witch was clearly in an ugly mood, and they knew it. I had a feeling that something awful was going to happen soon. "See, I'm having my breakfast this morning," said the Grand High Witch. "Then I am looking out of the window at the beach. And what am I seeing? I am asking you what I am seeing. I am seeing the revolting sight. I am seeing hundreds, I am seeing the thousands of revolting, repulsive little children playing on the sand. It is putting me right off my food. Why have you not got rid of them? Why have you not rubbed them out, these filthy, smelling children?" With each word she spoke, flecks of pale blue phlegm shot from her mouth like bullets. "I am asking you why!" she screamed. Nobody answered her question. "Children smell!" she screamed. "They stink out of the world. We do not want these children around here." The bald-headed in the audience all nodded vigorously. "One child a week is no good for me," the Grand High Witch cried out. "Is that the best you can do?" "We will do better," murmured the audience. We'll do much better." "Better is no good either," shrieked the Grand High Witch. "I demand maximum results. So here are my orders. My orders are that every single child in this country shall be rubbed out, squashed, squirted, squid, frittered, before I come back here again. 1 year's time. Do I make myself clear?" A great gasp went up from the audience, and I saw the witches all looking at one another, deeply troubled. And I heard one witch at the end of the front row saying, "All of them? We can't possibly wipe out all of them." The Grand High Witch whipped around as though someone had stuck a skewer on her bottom. "Who said that?" she snapped. "Who dares to argue with me? It was you, was it not?" She pointed a gloved finger as sharp as a needle at the witch who had spoken. I didn't mean it, your grandness," the witch cried. I didn't mean to argue. I was just talking to myself." "You dared to argue with me?" screamed the Grand High Witch. I was just talking to myself, cried the wretched witch. I swear at your grandness. And she shook with fear. The Grand High Witch took a quick step forward, and when she spoke again, it was in a voice that made my blood run cold. A stupid witch that answers back must burn until her bones are black. She screamed. No, no, begged the witch in the front row. The Grand High Witch went on. A foolish witch without a brain must sizzle in the fiery flame. Save me, cried the witch from the front row. The Grand High Witch took no notice of her, and she spoke again. An idiotic witch like you must roast upon the barbecue. Forgive me, your grandness, cried the witch. I didn't mean it. But the Grand High Witch continued. A witch who dares to say I'm wrong will not be with us very long. And a moment later, a stream of sparks that sounded like tiny white hot metal filings shot out of the Grand High Witch's eyes. They flew straight towards the one who dared to speak. I saw the sparks striking against her and burrowing into her, and she screamed a horrible howling scream, and a puff of smoke rose around her. A smell of burning meat filled the room. Nobody moved. Like me, they were all watching the smoke. And when it cleared away, the chair was empty. I caught a glimpse of something white, like a little cloud fluttering upwards and disappearing out the window. A great sigh rose up from the audience. The Grand High Witch glared around the room. I hope nobody else is going to make me cross today. There was a deathly silence. Frizzled like a fritter, said the Grand High Witch. Cook like a carrot. You will never see her again. Now, we get down to business. Join me tomorrow for the next chapter. Have a good day. Bye.